very pleased to welcome Dr. Anthony Lewis, who is the chair of the Windsor Humanists, and he's now going to give the humanist perspective to the same question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, everyone. Windsor Humanists are delighted and honoured to participate in this year's dialogues, especially in WAMSIS's 40th year, to provide a humanist perspective on what is a very real issue for all of us: why do humans suffer? Humanists look to science, reason, and evidence to understand the world and reality around us. A humanist view of suffering is formed by our common humanity, our evolved sense of empathy, and our shared experience of life. And it's also informed by the huge advances in medicine and science achieved in the last 200 years, which have led to marked improvements in our physical, mental, and social well-being. It's remarkable to consider that antibiotics, for example, have been around for less than 70 years, well within the lifetime of some WAMSIF members. Put starkly, suffering is an unavoidable consequence of being alive, and is an unfortunate experience we share with all living things. When we look at the natural world, we experience two conflicting sentiments. We wonder at the beauty of existence and the joys it can bring us. But in the wild, we also observe the brutal struggle to survive, to avoid being eaten as a daily focus for most creatures. The natural food chain, from the lowliest viruses to the elephant, consists of a vicious competition of who devours who. Based on archaeological evidence, we know the life of early humans in the Stone Age was brutal, as we live short, impoverished lives with an average lifespan of just 35 years. Recent discoveries have revealed that nearly 50% of adult males in hunter-gatherer societies died at the hands of other men. As a species, Homo sapiens are uniquely violent to each other, adding further to our suffering. Cruelty and harm that is caused deliberately in this way by our fellow human beings somehow cuts this deeper and in more lasting ways. In contrast to these brutal origins, a child born today in the UK can now expect to live to 95, with a quality of life and health even billionaires could not enjoy in 1900. This miracle has been achieved through advances in agriculture, technology, and cooperation. It is a story of human flourishing through our ingenuity that has helped mankind to transgress many areas of suffering, but where unfortunately we still have much to do. But as a humanist, I am optimistic for the future and our abilities to further reduce our suffering through continued scientific endeavour and social progress. However, despite these ongoing incredible advances, it's a sad truism that we will all suffer at some stages in our lives. Suffering is still the great unavoidable leveller. No matter who you are, how wealthy, high or low, or where you live, the brutal truth is that all of us as embodied living creatures will suffer to lesser and greater extents during our lives, in three main ways: through physical illness, through mental health issues, and through existential suffering when we experience death or loss, perhaps the hardest pain to bear. Clearly, these three kinds of suffering, the physical, the mental, and the existential, overlap and interact in ways far too complex to cover in just 10 minutes. But I'd like to cover one aspect of each briefly from a humanist perspective this evening. First, to physical suffering. I've already mentioned the impressive improvements in medicine that have transformed the health of most humans living today. Many diseases such as tuberculosis, smallpox have been vanquished or are now manageable, but there is still much suffering from poor pain control, cancers, multiple sclerosis, infectious diseases such as malaria, which still kill millions and cause enormous suffering in the world. There is still much to do. Genetic-based medicine promises further improvements over the next few decades. The rapid development of COVID vaccines in the last year is just the start of this coming revolution. However, modern medicine means that many of us are likely to face the awful decision of when to stop treatment or when to switch off the machines. The UK is one of the best palliative care sectors in the world with our hospice movement, but even so, our technology now allows us to prolong life indefinitely, which has the perverse effect of increasing suffering, especially at the end of life. This is why Windsor Humanists believe that all of us have a right to live, but we also have a right to a good death, and we actively support the campaign led by the wonderful charity Dignity in Dying to legalise assisted dying in the UK with appropriate safeguards. We believe that all of us have a right to decide for ourselves when the suffering we endure has become unbearable, especially when faced with a terminal illness. Moving on now to the second way of suffering, mental and emotional suffering. Modern medicine has also improved our understanding of the physical basis for many serious psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, psychosis, and other brain-based conditions, which can now be treated carefully with powerful drugs. Sufferers can now live near normal lives outside the mental institutions where we used to hide them away in days gone by. Thankfully, we are much more enlightened about mental health issues today. However, the persistent high rates of suicide, especially in teenage girls and young men, demonstrate that there remain real issues with respect to managing our mental health. Whatever life throws at us, all of us will have times in our life when we struggle to cope and feel we have nowhere to turn for help. Quite often, many of us do not want to burden our loved ones with our own distress during these difficult times. I volunteer as a Samaritan listener and have experienced firsthand how just listening to someone who's going through a difficult time without judgment and in complete confidence can really help them when they have no one else to turn to for whatever reason. Human kindness, altruism, and love is the special thing which sets us apart from other creatures. The power of authentic connection, love, and compassion from other human beings can be transformative for those coping with life's emergencies. The pandemic has very clearly demonstrated to all of us the power and importance of human connectedness. Nothing beats a good hug over a nice cup of tea, or the relaxed banter between good friends over a pint of beer on a summer's afternoon. I yearn for the return of good long hugs with my friends. As a humanist, I really believe that the innate goodness in all of us will collectively far outweigh our darker instincts over the generations. Finally, I move on to the third form of suffering, perhaps the hardest of all three, existential suffering. Humans are probably the first creatures that have evolved both a direct awareness of our own mortality and have also developed the means through language to communicate with each other about the brute absurdity of our inevitable non-existence, a huge pivotal cognitive singularity in the evolution of life on Earth. This unique mortality salience about our own individual non-existence and those of our loved ones is a scary thing for all of us at a deep, personal, subjective, emotional level. The resultant existential terrors have driven our desires to explain our existence throughout the ages to assuage our fears. We all have to find our own path to make the most of our lives. Some of us seek solace in faith and religion, but as a humanist, I choose to focus on this one precious life that I experience directly and know about. I face squarely the mystery of existence and the suffering we will all experience from just being alive. I strive to live authentically and with good grace and humour. As a humanist, I believe in the unlimited power of human love, kindness, and compassion to carry us through times of distress. I believe our innate altruism and evolved sense of empathy will always endure over our more violent, primitive instincts. Otherwise, we would not have survived as a species to be here today. As all of us do, I have experienced physical, mental, and existential issues during my life, and what helped me most at those times was the love and kindness from others, sometimes from unexpected quarters. The power of human love and connectedness really is a special thing. Human contact and compassion heals and soothes us all of us in our times of need, whether the suffering is physical, mental, or existential, or even for some all three. And for me, that is the thing that gets us all through times of distress, hardship, and suffering, whatever its nature. It is human contact. It is the power of human touch, of the loving hug, of the helping hand offered when you did not even know you needed it. So to end this brief exploration of human suffering, the humanist perspective on suffering is a simple message of hope and optimism. It's a belief and faith in our human capacity for love, which has the power to bring us together in common purpose so that all of us can be the best of who we are, to the benefit of ourselves and also to the benefit of others. I'd like to end with the humanist mantra for living a good life. It is very simple. We should all make the most of our lives for ourselves and others, and most importantly, be kind whilst we do it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Anthony. That's great. Thank you very much. I've got actually a different question for yourself, Anthony. The questioner says, "Thank you very much for your excellent and optimistic presentation. As a humanist, do you believe it's possible to have both the humanist philosophy of life and a belief in a higher being, i.e., God?" You're on mute at the moment, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the kind words. Yeah, it's a good question, and I go into schools as a humanist school speaker, and quite often I get asked this question because after my presentation and chat, quite often, say if I'm speaking in a faith school, they'll go, well, that's my religion, and I go exactly, because and the way I answer this is if you strip out the different doctrinal aspects of most religions and the actual different types of supernatural belief, the core of every religion is humanistic by its very nature, because we experience reality. It's common to us as embodied creatures. So underneath all the religions is belief in the goodness of people, the power of love. So I think there's a lot of common ground between humanist thought and most of the religions. But humanism, and I distinguish that between humanistic beliefs, which I think is contained in all religions, and humanism itself. All humanists believe that the reality is what we can see, and don't see any evidence for the supernatural. So as a humanist, humanists will be either atheist or agnostic. So I agree with Mark that you can believe in God and sort of have a lot of the humanist beliefs. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Anthony. so, Anthony, we now have one for you. Do humanists ever pray?
The easy answer to that is no, because who would a humanist be praying to? Because we don't believe in God. But that doesn't mean there isn't a sort of spiritual part of humanist life. We can still look at beautiful sunsets and wonder at the mystery of existence. So there's still that wonder and spiritual, existential wonder at the beauty of everything, but we enjoy it for what it is, and don't try to overinterpret it. We just enjoy it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I think it's got time very quickly. I'll ask this same question to you all. So I'll start with Abbas. The questioner says, "Thank you to every speaker. Very powerful. What I feel is missing is how to reduce suffering," he says, "by reducing the human behaviors, or maybe modifying the human behaviors which cause so much suffering, like greed, pride, and focus on ourself." Do you have any comment to that, Abbas? Very much. Anthony, on the same question, do you have any comments on that at all?
Yeah. In some ways, I agree with Abbas. It's the important thing is balance, but I do disagree with this concept that greed, pride, and focus and the negative emotions sit separate on their own. Because the important thing to realize with emotions, 80% of our brain is used to manage emotions, and every emotion has a positive and a negative. So, for instance, love can become obsession, fear can become xenophobia, self-esteem, which is really a big thing nowadays, to have self-esteem. Well, that can easily turn into pride and too much of a focus on self. So to pull these apart is impossible, because we would cease to be the humans we are. I think the important thing is that we keep it in balance. We enjoy the love, and the negative side sometimes is important as well. Like if you're under threat, it's important to protect yourself and self-defend yourself. So sometimes aggression is allowed, but again, it's keeping everything in proportion and everything in balance. Every emotion has evolved there for a reason, and most of it is protective as long as it's kept in balance.
Thank you, Andy.